instead of the O. That's my boy Nick. And lo and behold, I keep seeing all this foolishness. You know, Trump, of course, drops today that, you know, he references Virginia Giuffre, right? That Epstein stole him. And then all of a sudden, all I can see, you know, is this damn stuff about Sydney Sweeney. Everything everywhere, right? And it's all binary takes. It's all black and white. Seeing some smart takes, you know, like not really, nothing real good. But, and then, you know, I'm seeing all this stuff about Joey Swall, which I've been waiting on this one, right? Because the man, he travels in reaction content. And then I'm also seeing some stuff about Lauren Boebert and her son. A lot of misinformation going out about that. Now, I'm not going to defend Lauren Boebert, okay? She's my representative in Colorado. I can't stand her ass. She's a carpetbagger that came from the western part of the state. I don't know if that's west. I don't know why I'm pointing over there. Kind of fired up. But there's all this misinformation about her son, who is not in elected office, okay? And less about her. I mean, they're trying to make it about her, but it ain't happening. So I thought, instead of just being mad and going on a rant, what can I do to maybe make it educational? What can we do for ourselves to turn this into a wisdom opportunity so we don't fall for this okie doke? Because a lot of this stuff, this reaction content, all this stitching, all this stuff, it's designed to piss you off. And it's designed to get you to engage with it. Hell, I'm engaging with it by talking about it now. But my goal is always to try to drop knowledge, to try to help you all out so that when you can navigate, these social media and these internet streets, that you're not running into it, right? That it didn't drive you, like it did me, to grab the bullet. 95 rye, still rocking my Patriots cup, even though I'm a Broncos fan. I'll tell you a story about that, how I got this cup and why I still rock this cup. So back when I was living in Hawthorne, this is for all the folks that tune in early and see the message go on and say, oh, Fredric's online. Let me get on there. See what Unc got to say. So when I lived in Hawthorne, California, I had this deep sink, right? Ceramic. That damn thing had to be 1.5 feet deep. It was an old apartment, so built in the 70s. I didn't have dishwasher, but I don't need it. I can wash it by hand. And so somehow, right, I'm washing my Broncos cup, my coffee cup, and it slipped out of my hand, shattered in my damn sink. I was like, oh, shit. And my buddy said, I tell you what, I'm going to buy you a Patriots mug, right? He said, I'll waive this $20 you owe me. I think I lost the bet to him on something. We got to talk smack about something. And I lost the bet. He said, I'll waive the bet. He says, but you got to keep it till it breaks. I said, okay. I figured that deep-ass sink, this thing ain't going to last long. And that was 2017. And I still got the damn thing. 8 damn years. This cup ain't never broke. Never. I'm stuck with it now, even though I'm not a Patriots fan. But I can feel it creeping up on me every year, slowly. Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback ever. I knew it creeps into your soul. Just like this rage bait. So let me break it down, like why this stuff is a problem. So first of all, it's not a problem to be talking about some of the problems with the American Eagle commercial with Sydney Sweeney or the ad campaign they're doing. So for those of you who don't know, Sydney Sweeney, young actress, very good looking. She was in Euphoria. She's been in some other stuff. Like, she's what you would call a 10, right? She's probably the next Scarlett Johansson. I've never seen anything she's been in, but that's not because I don't like the woman. I just don't like some of the stuff that she's in. It's not my thing, right? These days, even though I write television and I write movies, I don't watch a lot of them. I mostly read books and I play video games. That's kind of where, I'm at. So she's in this campaign, and I think in the ad they talk about, like blue bloods, and they mention something about, like, she's blonde haired and this and that, or, it's like the genetics or something like that. And she says, "Oh, my genes are blue." Right. It's like, and then buy American Eagle jeans. Now, are there obvious, like, Aryan kind of stuff in there for, rage, clicky stuff, or is it a throw to that? Yeah. American Eagle is mostly kind of a middle class brand. They market it to white folks, you know. It's not considered a black or Hispanic brand. So that's their audience, right? But yes, it absolutely is. And it is problematic. Is it also just an ad? Yes, it is. It's absolutely just an ad. Hey, what's up, Lisa? How you doing, girl? And but does it have anything to do with Sydney Sweeney? And is she problematic in this and that? Not really. And maybe. The point is, all those things can be true. All of them. Every one of them. And you can discuss all those things, right? Without demonizing the other side. But the problem is when we run into reaction content, and I'm not saying I don't make reaction content, because I absolutely do. That's a big part of being in the online space, right? What it does is those creators that engage in that stuff, it's definitely binary and it appeals to their audience, right? So if you're of the more white supremacist bent, you're gonna, say things like the woke mob is attacking Sydney Sweeney and rah, 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 right? I just had one of them fools on one of my notes say the same thing. And is that true? Yeah, to a point. But it's not just the woke mob, as if conservatives are the most civil and level-headed and reasonable people they are, and speak with a very soft voice. No, man, they attack everything and anything. Rachel Zegler for Snow White, they attacked her, or the actress that played Ariel in the live remake of Little Mermaid because she's African American, all this other stuff, right? Or the lesbian kiss in one movie and this and that. They attack people all the time, right? It's just the internet mob mentality because it's low hanging fruit and it's easy to line up on one side or the other. The problem with that is it stifles out any sort of nuanced conversation. It stifles out things like, hey, is this just an ad for jeans? Yes. Yes, it is. However, there's this language that gets used that we don't associate with this and this and this, with white nationalism, with Aryan identity, with all this other stuff that is being used. And they're doing it purposefully. They're doing it to engage in rage bait, into word escapes me, into controversy. There we go. So they can sell more jeans. And that's the big problem with this, is this rage online becomes part of the grift. It becomes part of the marketing. And they know that. And trust me, I've been in these meetings. I know how these things work. I've worked for bigger people in the digital creative space. I know how they think. I know how they market their stuff. I know when they're like, hey, we structure it like this, this, and this. What outrage is acceptable that gives them plausible deniability and what doesn't. It's all an okie doke, every bit of it. Now, does that mean you shouldn't discuss it? Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. No, you should discuss it. Absolutely. Right? But you need to put it into that context. Right? Because in terms of, where this kind of fits in the hierarchy, is it important? To a point. But is it more important than the Epstein files and the victims and hammering home on that and giving Trump a break? No. Or ICE? No. One is your house is on fire. The other one is like, hey man, there's a dog crapping over in your garden. All right, well, yeah. I mean, we have to handle both. Or he's digging up your azaleas. Yeah, we need to handle both. Those are both the problems, But where do you want to put your focus? How much energy do you want to give it? Because unfortunately, we only have so much energy. Now, that's something you want to engage in. You want to educate people about it, man, go for it. All for it, But again, the problem with reaction content is the way it's made and the way it's crafted. And you got to keep this in mind when you're watching it. Those folks, the way they craft it, it's to funnel you to elicit a certain response. That's what it's done. And when you understand that's what's happening, you should be skeptical about whatever it is they're trying to say. I'm not saying you should discount it, but I'm saying you should be skeptical. That should set off, warning signs. Uh-oh, there might be an okie doke here. Yeah, and usually there is. So what happened with Joey Swole, right? For those of you who don't know who Joey Swole is a fitness creator, right? Big dude. He's usually very positive. He was all about positive gym culture when he started, but he's drifted more into stitch content. Now, what stitch content is, you take another creator's sort of TikTok or whatever, and then you stitch your reaction to it, right? So you watch it and then you react to it. You probably see a lot of that on Substack. It happens all the time. And the problem was when you traffic in that, especially when you're harsher on certain people engaging in bad behavior, right? And you don't cut them a lot of slack, is when you commit said bad behavior, the wolves are going to come after you. Your apology is going to be questioned. Your sincerity is going to be questioned. This is the problem with being a moral police, even if you're right on something. That's why I try to maintain some humility when I talk about anything I'm talking about. I leave open room for being incorrect, either on my viewpoint, or I don't have enough information, or I don't have the context right, or I'm missing something, because it's real easy for us as creators, especially when we're trying to put up content, we're trying to drive subscribers, we're trying to drive engagement, to say, to slant it a certain way, especially when our audience leans a certain way, And Joey got caught with that. Now, what was his sin? Well, he dressed up like Hulk Hogan, right? And he, basically was just him working out. And he talked about how Hogan was a big influence on his life, right? And this was after his death, Hulk Hogan's death. Now, for those of you who don't know Hulk Hogan, besides maybe you saw him at the RNC acting like a jackass, Hulk Hogan, for a lot of us growing up, especially me in the 80s as a little kid, like he was real inspirational. He had the American flag, and he'd come out, and he wasn't the heel. Like, so he became a heel later. So in wrestling, a heel is the bad guy, right? And then, you've got other guys called jobbers, right? So then there's that, like, those are the guys that are just kind of in the mix. They're sort of the background actors. And then you have sort of the hero, right? And, pro wrestling is absolutely scripted. It's written by writers just like me. It's like a soap opera, right? And that's been going on forever, right? Back in the 50s, that's when the 80s kind of brought this back with Nikolai Volkov. And then you had the Iron Sheik, and it was always like America's enemies. And then you had the Heartland people, they were the heroes. So the heels, and sometimes you have interesting guys that are start out as heels and become heroes. Like Ric Flair was cast as a heel, but he had so much charisma. People just kind of loved that shtick, and they loved Ric Flair. And they didn't care he was a heel, right? So eventually he became, the hero, the main character. But Hulk Hogan in real life was kind of a piece of shit. And if you've ever listened to Jim Cornette, so if you really want to get into wrestling and the history of wrestling from a guy who was there, one guy who was an announcer and then was a manager, it was Jim Cornette. And he was an announcer for WWF and back in the 80s. And he didn't get along with Vince McMahon. And he's kind of dropped the tea spilled the tea on a lot of this stuff. And one of those was Hogan. And he's talked about how Hogan was a serial liar. And he lied about everything. He lied about being able to bench press the most weight in the world. He lied about just everything. The guy was just a habitual liar. And people that work with him, nobody really liked him, right? He was this really popular guy, and people that work with him didn't like him, And then there was stuff that came out where it was on tape where he was upset at his daughter for dating a black man. He's using the N-word very liberally, and he was, he's basically a virulent racist. And then, of course, at the end of his life, one of the last things he did was speak at this last RNC, and yeah, basically endorsing Trump after all we know about him. And for that, wrestling fans basically turned on him and his legacy. So in the last WrestleMania, when he was in his 70s, this one that just happened past, he got booed mercilessly, right? So Hogan, for real wrestling fans, he's like our J.K. Rowling, right? We loved him as a kid. We were all about Hulkamania. I was a Hulkamaniac, but he's problematic as hell. And so it's just like, no, I'm not flying that anymore. I've grew up. You got me when I was a kid, but I'm not a kid anymore, right? It's kind of the same thing people are asking with J.K. Rowling. She's a virulent transphobe. She's a bigot. And just because her books that you love them as a child, you still have to wrestle with that fact. I'm not going to hit you over the head with it. And I'm not going to say that, hey, this makes you a horrible person. I get people struggle with that, right? It's hard to overcome nostalgia. That's why it gets sold and packaged to us so often. It is hard by design to get sold that, right? Or to get over that. Nostalgia for the Greeks is a curse. It is a longing for a time that didn't exist. It's longing for a home that you can never go back to. For the Greeks, nostalgia was considered a curse. Think about that. Next time you're like, oh man, the 80s. Oh, yeah, this music was the best. It's the best that was ever made. Oh, this is so cool, blah, blah, blah. And then you always kind of feel sad afterwards, right? You don't remember all the other stuff that was going on at that time that maybe you didn't see as a child, or, all the other things that, the people that lived through it as adults probably wasn't that great. That's nostalgia, you know? So, but the thing about Joey is he posed in this, right? And people called him out for it. because that's his thing. Joey Swole calls out people committing bad behavior, and he got called out for it. And then he made it worse. He went on a live, or he went on a stream, and he started trying to defend himself, saying, well, if you're going to drag me, you're going to have to drag all kinds of colored people because they're friends with him and they defended him. Now, he says he meant to say people of color, but he said colored people, right? Now, it's not up to me to pass judgment on him. Do I think that, there's a slip of the tongue? Sure, I do that all the time. All the time. But and he apologized later, but there were people that weren't willing to forgive him, and he got really upset about it. And then he posted today, he's like, I'm done. All the good I've done, it's basically a woe is me post. And he has done some good. He's a big factor in like trying to get cameras, which are, ever present in gyms, and people, both men and women, filming other people just to mock them online, right? And even though cameras are illegal and you can't film without someone else's consent, he's been a big driver at getting that stopped. And that's really important, especially in a shared space where people who, like me, or anyone else that might be, say, uncomfortable going to the gym, because it's a fact when people start working out and they start going back to the gym that they feel uncomfortable because none of us want to look foolish. None of us want to be embarrassed. None of us want to look like we don't know what we're doing. And so, and especially if we're out of shape and we don't feel good, and it's hard to get back into a space like that. So it's nice to have to make that as welcoming as possible, and that was what he started with. But along the way, he delved more into reaction content. And the problem when you do that and you become the morality police, that dirty end of the stick is at some point going to be pointed back at you. It's going to happen. And you have to be ready for it. And unfortunately for Joey, he wasn't ready for it. Now, am I defending the guy? No. But is he part of the problem? Yeah. Has he done good? Yes. But he's also part of the problem because he trafficked a lot into reaction content because it was easy. It got clicks. That's the entirety of the manosphere. All of it. They stitch some woman having a bad day, talking about her ex-husband, talking about her ex-boyfriend, being frustrated at the dating scene with men, and they take a slice of it, right? And then, they say, oh my God, look at this woman. She's terrible. No wonder no man wants to be with her. And look at this, guys. This is how modern women think. This is the thinking of modern women. Mm-hmm. No, it's not. It's one woman who made a post, who is going through something, who maybe regrets it. How many of us have said something dumb? I do it all. I mean, I don't try to do it all the time, but I get upset. I get overwhelmed. I get frustrated. I say things I don't mean, and then I have to apologize for. And unfortunately now we put it out into the world and people consume it. And look, I'm doing it now. And there's nothing wrong with it, right? But how many of these folks put something out there and then wish they could pull it back? Even innocuous stuff. It happens. It's happened to me. Happened to me on Substack. I put something out there about asking a woman out of the coffee shop. I was not ready for the reaction it got, and it overwhelmed me. I just said, okay, no, there's a boundary there. That's the other part of it too, that we all have to consider when we're consuming this stuff. Because you got to remember, we're all consumers here. I love talking to you guys. I really do. If you guys make me feel like I'm not just wasting my breath, that, hey, I've got something to say, let me share it with folks, and maybe they feel the same way I do. And maybe there we can have a minor connection. But at the end of the day, but also we're not interacting with each other like we're all sitting in a room. I mean, there's 60 of us here now. That'd be pretty tough, right? Especially when we're from all over the world, you know. But there's also things that like we forget the other person on the other side of things is a human being too, right? And they're going to have flaws, and they're going to be arrogant, and they're going to say dumb shit, and they're going to have things that they're not educated about or they're not up to speed about. And that's where we have to grant other folks some grace. I'm not saying you have to give people grace you ain't ready to give it to. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a phrase that I still kind of carry that I got when I was a little kid in a Baptist church in Hawaii. There, but for the grace of God, go I. The thing with this stuff that we're all going through, right? I'm kind of seeing it being on the creator side of the fence with what people are consuming. And here on Substack, we're being inundated, right? Like, we're being inundated with this right-wing BS. They've come over here. They've determined, hey, we can get money. We can get this. Let's come over here. Let's stir up some shit. And you're going to get that. You're going to get people riling you up, pissing you off, right? You're going to get people trying to funnel you into an opinion. Like with Lauren Boebert. Her son, I'm seeing this meme go around. Oh, he abused his son. He was a felony. La, da, da. You can go read a Newsweek article. It wasn't no felony. It was a misdemeanor. It was criminal negligence, but what it was is his son left the house. He got out the front door. His young son. And the dad, I guess, he didn't know where he was. A neighbor saw him, called the police. Right? And that's what happened. Now, it's easy for me. It would have been simple for me to say, how dare, Lauren Boebert's son, oh my God, she can't represent this district. Blah, 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 blah. But that ain't fair to him. That ain't fair to his son. It's a bad situation. And yeah, her son's done some dumb shit in the past. And if he did it now, I'd hammer him, But that's not what this was. Now, does that make Lauren Boebert any less horrible? No, absolutely not. Not at all. And the thing is, we don't need to make up stuff about these people, right? Just say that they're extra horrible. We don't need to say that. Yeah, he should have watched his son a little better, but you know what? People are already posting in chat. How many times is son got away, a child got away from me? I got away from my parents when I was younger. I have dogs run out the front door or run into the street, scare the hell out of me, So I remember there was a time where there was a rumor going around, some internet BS, right? That Donald Trump was responsible for 9/11. And, I had a friend bring that up to me, and I said, that's horseshit, man. That never happened. And they're like, yeah, but he's so horrible. It probably is true. I was like, no, it's not. He's done enough horrible things that we can be mad at him for the horrible things he's done. That's enough. We don't have to add to it, because when we do that, we start leaving the realm of facts and reality, and we can't do that. We have to try our best to stay within that. That doesn't mean we don't need to be active. That doesn't mean we don't need to do things or push back or even be passionate about it and say, no, this is wrong. I don't give a damn. It's wrong, and call it out. But it's got to be based on truth. It's got to be based on what is as factually close to what reality is as we can possibly get. Otherwise, we're no better than the other folks that are trying to trick us. They're trying to make us stupider with all this rage bait and all this other crap. And that's in some, like, and here's the thing. I don't want to say that social media is all bad. Right? I don't want to say that, you shouldn't be on it. But it's like anything else. You have to judge what you're capable of consuming. It's a good idea to check in with yourself and say, hey, man, am I consuming too much of this rage bait stuff? Like, man, am I going down this rabbit hole, man? Is this helping me? You know? So, that's it. Because you're going to see this, and you're going to see people pile on to try to make, it's like to make their own clicks and their own views and their own this and their own that. I'm not going to try to do that. But I might from time to time. I might step across that line. I might make that choice. I had that choice earlier this week when somebody said, hey, man, you should talk about, a buddy of mine was like, you should talk about the Lauren Boebert thing. And I'm like, nah, man, there's nothing there. It was like, there's nothing there, you know. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what was on my mind tonight. Is all this kind of now. Again, that doesn't mean people shouldn't talk about it. Talk about whatever you want. You know, just make sure that you have the context for what it is. Just make sure that you give it the proper weight that it should. Because one thing you don't want to do is close yourself off to other people's perspective. Even me talking about, say, Sydney Sweeney or Joey Swole and Hulk Hogan or J.K. Rowling. I'm not, like, for J.K. Rowling, I'm not a Harry Potter fan. It doesn't affect me as much the way it would, say, someone who grew up with it and that was their cherished childhood memory. I'm also not trans. That's not going to, that kind of, bigotry is not going to hit me the same. So when trans folks speak out, we need to listen to them. We need to hear what they have to say. Even if we don't, we may not agree with it, or we may not be ready to agree with it, right? You know, there's, it's the same thing with women, right? What they're going through, you know, and you might see something, right? You might, you might see some content or something you don't agree with. You know what I mean? You might see something that, hey, I don't agree with this steak. Da-da-da-da. Doesn't mean it's any less valid. Just depends on what it is. You know, that's why I always say women are people too. You know, they're gonna make assumptions about how men are, and I don't have any idea what it's like to be a man. But They're also going to say something about how men are from their perspective, which is very valuable because it's something we as men may not see that they can clue us in on. It's like, hey, men are doing this. It's like, and this is how they treat me, and this is how my life's been, and da 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 da. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. Generally, if somebody's talking about their experience, you probably don't need to put too much of a thumb on the scale unless they're missing a context, right? You know, it's when people start talking about other people and how their experience should be. That's when it gets to be problematic, you know. And sometimes that's just, you know, that's just semantics. That's just, how people use their words, and you don't need to beat them up for that, you know. So a woman might say, well, all men are like this. And, actually, ma'am, I know several men who are not like that. It's like, what's probably best to ask in that right there is to say, are you saying this is your experience with men? And most of the time, I'd be like, oh, yeah, this has been my experience with men. And that's fair. She's not saying every single man on the earth. She's just saying, this is my experience with men. You know, and what she's really saying, all the men I've met, this has been my experience. But people don't normally talk like that. So it's good to ask clarifying questions, especially if you're trying to understand somebody and where they're coming from, which we always want to try to do if we can and we have the energy to do it. Some folks, I don't really need to understand where they're coming from. Usually that's the fascists and the authoritarians and the racists and bigots. Like, I don't really need to understand where you're coming from. I can just kind of bow out then. But yeah, that's what was on my mind tonight. I just wanted to jump on and just talk to you a little bit while I had a little bit of whiskey, having whiskey on a Tuesday. My goodness. Whew. Week's already kicking my ass. Normally I wait till Friday to have my medicine, if I have any medicine at all. But I'm having it on Tuesday. Lord. Mm. But yeah. Oh, brow Lakers. Yeah. I don't do clear. I don't do clear, Pambo. Not at all. Won't do it. And clear liquor messed me up. Messed me up bigger than anything. Oh, yeah. I'm going up on Tuesday. He choosing. I choose whiskey. Phew. Yeah, I used to be like that, Lisa. You know, but all this madness going on, all this change, and I'm just like, I'm gonna have to have a little bit. Just a little nip here and there, kind of get me through the day. You know, not through the day, just like sort of a nightcap. You know, but like I'm drinking more than I was, which used to be never. Now it's like, but again, my drinking is sort of like, you know, like I had a whole beer with dinner twice a week. Or I had half a shot of whiskey. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm very much a teetotaler, you know, because, liquor's not really my thing. Alcohol's not really my thing, you know. Was when I was younger, but it ain't now. Now I'm just like, you know, it's like, yeah. Oh, yeah. I do that. Cut the grass, nice summer day, get you a beer. Like, that's it right there. That's a little slice of heaven, you know. So a little bit of peace and quiet, fresh smoke, fresh cut grass, a little shade, blue sky with some clouds, nice breeze. Yeah, especially a nice Colorado breeze, about 78, 79. Perfect. Perfect. Can't get better than that. I've tried to go back to like the South and East Tennessee, it's too damn muggy. I can't do it. I get there and I'm just like, my goodness. I can't do, Steven, I can't do coffee and Bailey's, man. I try, you know. Well, here's the thing. I will do it on an airplane if it's a morning flight. You know, like, I will absolutely do a Bailey's and coffee. Now the best Irish coffee I've ever had was at a place called the Dead Rabbit in Manhattan. Best Irish coffee I've ever had in my life. I think they're still open. That was pre-pandemic. But yeah, so yeah, I'm getting to where it's like I like just straight cream, half and half, or nothing at all. Trying to get away from sugar, you know. But yeah, so anyway, that's all I had for you guys. I just wanted to chat at you. I was like, do I want to make 3 damn videos? But no, I don't want to make 3 damn videos about any of this stuff. I was like, you know what? All right, I'll just go talk to the folks. Do a little unk speaks. You know, and then we go from there. But as always, I appreciate y'all, and remember, keep the faith and defend democracy. And I'll see you guys later.